Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing here at AC Inc. And we are back today with Brecon, one of our incredible field coach specialists, franchise growth advisors. How's it going, Brecon?
Great, Bill. Thanks for having me back.
Woo, we're excited. I want to kick off today's episode with a really fun icebreaker. So if you are new to listening to the podcast, first of all, welcome. We love having new listeners. This is such a fun podcast. We talk all about, of course, all things franchise growth, but especially on the franchisee support and coaching side, as that is our specialty. And we are also huge fans of random questions and like icebreakers. If you ever join one of our roundtables or any of our events, we love them. So I thought we would add them to the podcast. We did this maybe last year. So we kick off every episode with a bit of an icebreaker, get to know the guest. And today, Brecon, your icebreaker is, it's a good one. I've never done anything like this before. Mouse pad, trackpad, or no mouse pad? How's your computer set up? Do you understand?
I have a mouse.
You have a mouse. Okay. But do you
and I
have
have no mouse pad.
no mouse pad? Okay. I was also no mouse pad for so long. And then Josh, my husband, he was like, what are you doing? Why do you not have like any kind of pad underneath this? And he thought it was crazy. And I've been doing it for years. So anyway, I bought one. It actually is nice, but I didn't think it was that weird. Like, have you ever had a pad underneath your mouse?
Oh, when we first got a computer like 30 years ago, maybe, but
I was gonna say, I think he's showing some old school tendencies with that. I don't think that's super common anymore.
honestly, I have a laptop and it just kind of sits on top of my laptop.
Oh my
I
gosh. Oh, that type of mouse situation. Interesting. That's not like mine. I have like,
sometimes I put it off to the side on
yeah.
a piece of
Yeah.
paper or something.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
works.
Yeah. I was wondering if that was something that like people just thought either like this is the exact way it should be set up or not.
Are
I
you using a mouse? Or are you
I have a mouse for my big computer, but my little laptop, I just use my trackpad. Like I
I,
don't connect
I
my mouse.
could never get the trackpad. I
No.
never got into it. So mine shut off. Can't stand it.
That's so interesting. I do have to say every once in a while, like when I didn't have a big computer, I do like photo editing and stuff, which is why I have a bigger monitor thing, which is why a mouse is really helpful. But when I didn't have that, I sometimes would connect my mouse to my laptop, but I got so used to the trackpad. I love like sitting on the couch and like not
My
needing.
kids think it's bizarre that I use it because they're raised on trackpads, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
do have to say, depending on the tasks you're doing or depending on like how good your computer is, trackpads can be really annoying. Like I've had a few where they are really frustrating.
Also, I'm kind of big and or long and gangly, and so the trackpads, it just there's hands everywhere when I do that. I end
Yeah.
up hitting buttons by mistake, and
I
yeah,
hear you. I hear you. As I said, like I have had a couple where the trackpad, I'm like, I could not. Like it's just, it wouldn't work. But this one I have is actually really nice and big, so it makes it easier. Anyways, I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, oh,
cool.
I realized that was such a weird thing. So anyway, I thought I would ask.
Oh
Okay.
gosh, I'm weird. No,
Yeah, I guess he was like, you need a pad underneath this. It's like, okay. And it is nice. I mean, it's fine. I don't really notice the difference, to be honest. Okay, we are going to dive into the topic of today now that we've covered that random icebreaker.
awesome
Um,
segue.
yeah, awesome. And moving on. So we are going to be talking about coaching franchisees on leadership today. So I want to kind of start this with coaching franchisees on leadership as a field coach. And if again, for context, for anyone who is a bit newer to listening to the podcast, I know it's a new year, so listening to maybe some new podcasts, again, we're super excited you're here. But as a fractional coach, like you go into systems, first of all, you were a franchisee. So you had a coach, you had a field coach who worked with you. But then also now you come in as a fractional field coach to a lot of the brands we work with. So you've kind of seen this across like lots of different systems and the ways that franchisees respond to leadership coaching or the idea of someone coming in and going, I'm going to help you with some leadership. How does this often appear to you? Like, how is it kind of clear, like, oh, leadership coaching needs to be like something we talk about? Or is it like always something you come into a system, like knowing you're going to work on? Or is it something that comes when you see like struggling with like decision making? Like if a franchisee is really struggling with making some hard decisions, you're like, I feel like we could really bring in some talk about like the mindset of leadership and like leading the team and having confidence in these, like, where does it often come up that you realize, okay, coaching on leadership really needs to happen with this location or this franchisee or their team? How does that often kind of appear from your experience?
Well, it doesn't usually appear in our first meeting. I'll say that. I'm not like,
Okay.
hey, you suck as a leader.
No,
Let's
no,
talk
no.
about this. Um, but I find that I usually pick up, I mean, you can see how they interact with you as a
Mhm.
coach, right? And just like, are they receptive to feedback and open dialogue? So it gives you an inclination of as to kind of what they are like as leaders too, because are they good listeners? Do they ask questions? Are they interested?
Mm,
Are they distracted? So you can kind of pick up some just general things from there. But then it often comes from things like staff retention is a problem, or their staff aren't getting tasks done, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstandings or miscommunications that happen. Uh,
yeah.
or man, I had to yell at Jimmy. Like they'll tell you the things they did, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's usually fairly apparent pretty quickly, I would say. I mean, it
Yeah.
depends how often you're meeting with people.
Mhm.
Meeting, I usually say by meetings 3 through 7, I have a pretty good idea
Yeah.
how their team is. Are they strong? Do we have a culture issue? Is there leadership concerns? And if
Yeah.
so, then I'm starting to form game plans in my head as to
Yeah.
how to address it. And it's going to be different with every franchisee because they're people, and not everybody likes to be have it pointed out that maybe they're not the ideal leader for their team.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's really interesting because I feel like leadership coaching, like as a field coach coming in and helping a franchisee with something like getting better at looking at their metrics and stuff like that. I feel like that is usually met with a lot of like, oh, that would be awesome. I would love to get better at my financial
It's a lot
statements. Or
easier,
like, yeah, I feel like it would
less
be
ego assigned.
so much less. And honestly, like I'm a person too. Like if someone came in and was like, "Oh, we need to work on your finance skill," I'd be like, "Yes, I definitely do." Like, yeah, for sure. Even though I think I'm fine, like my budget's good and everything. But if someone came in, I was like, "Yes, of course, I want to learn more." But if someone was like, "Oh, we need to work on like your communication," or like, "Oh, the way you delegate is not really work." It definitely does for some reason, I think just on a human level, like hit closer to home, I guess. And I'm wondering, like, so what are those common issues then? Like what are the challenges that would come up? Like is it that you would just feel a lot of resistance if you started bringing up things like leadership, like style conversations or the mindset or the
Yep.
styles of leadership? Like what kinds of challenges come up when you start kind of heading into that direction?
One, ego is a big part of it, right? Because
Yeah.
it feels for a lot of us, it feels like a personal attack.
Yeah, I know, which is so interesting because wouldn't you say this? It's a skill, like and like learning how to read your P&L statements or like, your budgeting for next year. But like it's interesting that it is technically the same as that type of skill, but it feels so much more connected to who you are as a person.
I agree, and I also think it's a lot. People view those other things, whether it's learning how to read a P&L or use KPIs, as like a simple skill that can be taught.
Yeah.
Leadership is much more nebulous, and so it's much more gray. And frankly, to teach it is much harder.
Yes, for sure.
And so, yes, how to get franchisees to realize that leadership might be a problem is a challenge because you don't want to damage the relationship irreparably, obviously.
Of course.
But so through guided questions is what I generally try and get them to recognize. Retention is an issue, culture is an issue. Okay,
Mhm.
those are issues, but why?
Yeah.
Why are they issues? Maybe it's we're hiring the wrong people. Maybe we're screening the wrong people. Maybe there's some issues with myself
Yeah.
as the leader of this company. And I often refer to how I made every mistake you can as a manager,
Yeah.
right? And so I take it away a little bit.
Mhm.
I'm pointing out it's your problem. These were some of the mistakes I made. Do you think these might be similar to some of the challenges you're facing?
Yeah. Or
Um,
even like if a field coach doesn't have past experience as a franchisee, because we talk a little bit about, credibility building as a field coach with a Z, right? Being
yeah,
able to say, like, I have similar experiences to you is one way to do it. But also you could say, I have experience in the business world. And these are things that I've experienced either in a management position, in a corporate job, or with my boss, in other situations, right? So you can kind of reference back. And I like that, like taking it away from it's not like one person's problem. We're
well,
all trying to make this business better and identifying that like, oh, I've struggled to lead people in this way before or whatever would be a good credibility building piece of that so that it doesn't feel like we're just talking just about you.
the other piece I do, I mean, one of the first things I do as a coach when I meet with a new franchisee is I talk about how they want me to hold them accountable.
Mm,
And so I'll ask, do you want me to be like kid gloves? And I can do that. Like, I mean, I have empathy and I can sit here and I have real concerns about this and I'll adjust my
talk
tone
softly and
softly and that kind of stuff. Or do you just want me to give you the blunt truth?
Yeah.
And I'll do that. I'll do it again. I'll do it with kindness and empathy and respect always.
Mhm.
So sometimes as a coach, I do have to say, Jimmy or Sally or whoever it is, or Belle. I've never had to coach Belle because Belle usually coaches me. But you know, one of my jobs is to tell you the truth and what I think.
Mhm.
And so I do see an area that I'm concerned about. And I'd like to bring it up, but it's not an easy topic. Are you okay if we dive into this today?
Yeah.
And before I do that, I've made sure we've cleared the deck of any other issues that might be up top
Yeah.
because they got to be ready and in the right headspace to hear it.
Totally. I think that's such a great tip. Just even if I'm a coach or if I'm someone in the operation space who has to have a conversation like that, if you are really noticing, especially as you said, like after maybe a couple months of working with a franchisee, or right, if you've worked on a lot of those other hard skills and you're kind of starting to see, oh, there's still some issues. Like we've done the work on, making sure they're hiring the right people, and we're still seeing a lot of culture issues. Like where could that be coming from? To be able to address a topic like that just by saying, like, hey, are we in the right space to talk about something like that today? And then doing that foundational work at the beginning to assess, like, how does someone best receive that type of news, and have them be honest with you kind of in the beginning of like, would it be better if I'm just like, hey, here's what's happening, we need to talk about this? Or do you really want this to be something where I'm very gentle, I approach you, we take time, maybe I give you a heads up, we'll be talking about something. Like, people take news differently, people take conversations differently. So I think those are two really, really great pieces of advice when we're talking about something a bit trickier like this.
And
People can
as a
take.
coach too, I mean, we've talked about this. One of the important things is they have to be able to read people.
Mhm.
Like I've gone into meetings where I had that conversation, and with my experience now, if I was going back, I would, you know what, I would have waited to the next meeting just because
Mm.
they weren't in the right space today. They had a fight
Yeah,
with their partner, or man, they were putting out fires, and
totally.
and so you got to be able to read them, and you can be prepared all you want, go in, and know what you want to say, but as a coach, you got to be able to read them and say, you know what, today's not the day.
Yeah,
We're
for
gonna have
sure,
a
for sure.
conversation. It's gonna be in 2 weeks instead, or a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Or after we've moved past this, major issue or something like that, for sure. And as a coach too, like just from your perspective, and again, you've given already lots of really good tips in terms of like how to bring this to someone, how you're spotting this, what are the foundations you can set in the beginning to make conversations like this a lot easier. The guiding questions, of course, always helpful as a field coach, but what are some other ways like a field coach can kind of help a franchisee become a better leader, whether that's like resources you're giving them, or the guided questions piece, like where are kind of the topics we can dive into so that someone realizes, oh my gosh, and maybe even not the realizing, because we've kind of talked about that, but actually the development, like how do we as people like kind of become better leaders? And obviously the first step, is we've spent the most of the podcast talking about, is being honest with ourselves, but like that is something I can really work on, and like that's obviously the first step. But after that, like, where do you go from there after you've kind of recognized, like, oh, we do need to work on our culture. I do need to work on being more confident in decisions, or, like I do need to work on being more empathetic with my team, right? Whatever those like soft leadership skills are that they are
Yeah.
recognized now, where do we go from there as a coach?
Honestly, Belle, this takes time.
Yeah,
This is not like teaching them to read a P&L. I can teach most people to read a basic P&L in one session,
totally.
and then we just put in the reps. In that aspect, it is similar. It like I've done a lot of role plays
Yeah.
with a lot of franchisees over the years where they're practicing. Okay, we have to have that conversation with Jimmy.
Yeah.
Let's map out how do we think it's going to go.
Yeah.
All right, how do you think Jimmy will react? What
Yeah.
is Jimmy's personality type? Like, where are they on the? Maybe we've used personality profiling tools, whether it's Zoracle or Disc or whatever. Okay, now Jimmy's taken. Now we know Jimmy's green, blue, okay, or whatever colors you're using. Or so let's approach that. How's Jimmy's headspace right now? How do
Mhm.
you know when is the best time of day to talk to Jimmy? Is
Yeah.
Jimmy a visual learner or audio or kinesthetic learner?
Mhm.
Does Jimmy respond better when it's one on one, or like when you're out walking? Does Jimmy need something to fidget with that's
Yeah.
uncomfortable? Like all
So
these
would be,
factors.
this would be coaching a franchisee on how to have like a tougher conversation or a bigger conversation with one of their team members in that leadership side. So that role
And then
playing,
you're practicing,
yeah, on that. Yeah,
right?
I think that is so real. The role playing is so interesting. It's something that you don't see a ton. or I didn't see a ton before I entered into the coaching space. And you realize like how helpful it is. And even what you were doing is not always the role playing too, but it's just the questions of, as you said, like, do we know when it's the best time to talk to somebody about something or performance related thing? Like, is it regular check-ins or is it not, right? Is it like taking them for coffee and having a chat and asking how they're doing? And like, have they implemented something like that in their system? Like all of that stuff is so, so valuable.
Yeah, and we've said it a lot on this pod, I know, but like the idea in terms of resources, like just servant leadership, right?
Mhm.
Never asking your folks to do something that you want to do, and in you leading by example. And I mean, there's good stuff. I love Simon Sinek stuff, right? Like leaders eat last and start with why. The Five Dysfunctions of a Team is another good resource
Okay.
book. Um,
I don't
I mean,
want as
but,
much.
uh, that's one I went through as a franchisee probably 15 years ago, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, we went through it as part of the first franchise council for Bathfitter back in the day.
Oh, so cool.
Five
That's really neat.
dysfunctions of the team. Yeah, it was really interesting. I think it was. Oh, now I'm doubting myself. I think it was Bathfitter. Yeah, I think it was my Bathfitter days. But maybe it was Comfort Keepers, and I blended the two. This is what happens when you get old, though. But those things where people are leading through example, kindness, empathy, but they set the example of being honest with themselves. Like opening. We talk about you want to hold other people accountable and be truthful. You got to be as a leader, be able to say, "Hey guys, I'm not good at this, and I screwed up here,
Yeah.
and I'm really sorry, and this is what I'm doing to make it right moving forward."
Mhm.
And once they set that example, now everybody else. I mean, if you're holding yourself accountable, and you can be called out, then everyone else can be called out, and they have got. It's just like on a sports team where you've
Yeah,
got like Sidney Crosby can get yelled at by the coach. Anybody else can get yelled at too, right?
totally.
So
Totally.
those kinds of setting that bar, I think, is big.
Yeah. So talking a lot about example, talking a lot about yeah, the owning up and being vulnerable and all those pieces are definitely big ones. The practice, I really think that it takes time to build leadership skills is such a good takeaway as a field coach to feel like, oh, this is something I should be able to kind of like work on and then we can like check off and like move forward. It's really something, as you said, that like is a constant development. If you know that someone maybe has trouble like having those types of empathetic, vulnerable conversations, or don't really love to own up to mistakes, and you're kind of identifying that it's going to be an ongoing process of like, okay, like how do we kind of interact in this situation? The role play is great, like so many ways, but it needs to be something that's like kind of constantly on the radar and being worked on in these different ways. But I love the resources side. And just to be clear too, sometimes I think people bring up resources, especially for something like soft skills, like leadership, and especially for like field coach to franchisee, as like a solution, like, oh, you guys should read this book. And then we don't really need to like do the role play and do the vulnerability conversations. And like, I think that is not what these resources are supposed to be for. But instead, what I see often, and like people on the field coach roundtable love talking about like just some handy resources to have on hand, because I think what can happen is a franchisee recognizing, oh my gosh, I need to become way better at being vulnerable with my team, or way more like decisive and sure and confident. And, like whatever the things are that they're identifying, or like we need a more positive culture, like whatever the thing, and they've identified it, they're excited to work on it, they know it'll impact their business. If you get to that point, sometimes it can feel like as a franchisee, you're like, well, how do I do that? Like, what are the steps? And as a coach, you're trying to go, okay, well, it's going to take time. We're going to have to practice. It's going to be conversations about what stuff, stuff coming up and checking ourselves and going back to the things we know need to be worked on. But that's not really fun for a franchisee to go, oh, so it's just like ongoing work. But that's where I think those resources can be kind of this good, like, oh, it'll be something we're ongoing working on through all the different conversations we're having about all parts of your business. But here are some awesome resources we can kind of have, or you could start with, as you said, or like work on together with a peer group, or do with your whole team. But it's going to kind of be that step that's more tangible. Because I think as a business owner, it can be very frustrating if there isn't a tangible step, right? If it's just, oh, it's going to be ongoing work. It's like, that's tough. So
Yeah.
sometimes I find those resources can be a really good like step in the right direction if someone does love like a tangible action step. And because leadership skills take a lot of time and a lot of practice,
Yeah.
not just filling in a spreadsheet. So
No,
I do find those
no.
resources really, really helpful. So thank you for that list. That the list of books was awesome.
And just to add to that too, I mean, Bell, like we used to do at CK once a year, I'd put out a survey to the office team and the leadership team and they would rank me.
Hmm.
So again, I'm being vulnerable. I'm open.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the tools you need. Am I supportive? Am I positive enough for you? Do I, what, I forget what the other questions were, but it was basically along those lines.
Mm.
And rank me.
Yeah.
I
And
wanted them to rank me
if it's
in
tense
this way.
across the board, like why are people not feeling like they can be honest, right? Like it's also one of those things where
Anonymous.
the people not being transparent in those types of things, you're like, wait, now maybe we should have a conversation about like, you don't need to just rank me as good on all these things. You know what I mean? Like if you actually genuinely have some good feedback and want to say like, oh, I would love if we were more positive around the space, or if we, had more frequent communication with you, or whatever the thing is, right? Like making sure that
Yeah.
you're not just seeing someone go, yeah, perfect, and then moving on.
I always used to tell my clients, and I still do, but I mean, my leadership team, you will never hurt my feelings by telling me how I can better support you.
Yeah,
Because as a leader, that is my job, is I am here to support you so that you can do the job to your best of your ability.
totally.
So
Totally.
have at it, man. Let's talk about it. And cards on the table.
Yeah.
But not everybody's comfortable with that. And it does take practice, to our point. And it is years and years. And I'm still learning. We're all learning on how to be better leaders all the time.
Yeah.
So
And I think even that type of communication would be so helpful, like from field coach to franchisee, to just be like, oh, and just to be clear, like no one's ever going to be like, no, I'm a perfect leader. Like leadership, the very definition of it is we are constantly learning to become better. And that's
every mistake you can as a leader, trust me.
yeah, no, but and just I think having that type of communication as a coach too is this is not one of those skills like a profit and loss sheet or a balance sheet or whatever. It's not something we're going to say, okay, perfect, you know how to do this now moving forward. Like that's not going to be on this list of skills. It's going to be in this other area where we are always looking at how to become better. That's what being a leader is always looking for ways to better support people around you and be a better force for your specific, like, and you get new team members all the time and they're going to need different stuff. Like it's just a constant evolution. So not feeling like it's something that gets to get checked off the list and like, okay, now we never talk about it
Yeah,
anymore.
put it in the drawer. We're
Yeah.
done. It goes in with the strategic plan, and I will look
Yeah.
at it again.
Yeah. Well, we did the SWOT. We're done. Moving on. Yeah. So interesting. I think those are such good tips and so many good key takeaways. Is there any other last resources though that you want to list off? Because I know we listed a couple books. Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last, I know is phenomenal. You listed a couple other ones. Is there anything else in terms of even like people to listen to or anything like that that could be helpful?
The Get a Grip by Gino Wickman is another good one. It's you can listen to audio, and yeah, the voices are a bit weird, but the story of someone they have a dysfunctional culture
Mhm.
within their team. That's by Gino Wickman. Again, Get a Grip. It's the EOS and Traction team.
Yep.
Put that together. That one's really good. And then for those people in leadership positions, if they have the finances, but they struggle at reading people,
Mhm.
getting their people to take the personality profile tools, again, whether it's Oracle or DISC, can really give them insight as to how to better chat with those people.
Yeah.
Because some of us, can naturally read people and just say, okay, when I'm talking with Brecon, I'm going to speak this way. When I'm speaking with Bell, I'll adjust my leadership style this way. Lots of folks can't do that naturally. And so having it that, okay, I got to remember Bell's this way, Brecon's that way, and then they'll adjust accordingly. But without that tool, for some people, it's really hard.
Yeah, that's actually a really great tip and a really great, again, like tangible step, because some of this stuff can be frustrating even on the franchisee side to be like, well, what are the actual things that I can kind of start working on, and
Yes.
having just a few of those, whether it's a book to read or getting some profile characteristic assessments so that you really have a deeper understanding of the people on your team. Like some of those can be really helpful and actually make it feel like you're moving forward if you are really realizing like, wow, I need to work on this, which I know can be helpful even just mindset wise for a lot of business owners.
And yourself, get your own personality test done. It's always kind of insightful sometimes and a
Yeah.
good eye opening for some folks.
It is. I don't know. I was thinking that the other day. I was like, I feel like at different moods, I would fill in these differently. Like, it's funny how much you learn about yourself. Even like, would I fill this in like this all the time? Like, it is fascinating how those assessments work. Is really cool. Awesome, Brecon. Well, this has been a fantastic episode as always. And thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate your insights and all your experience as both franchisee and field coach side is so helpful on these topics for sure. And for everyone listening, thank you so much. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Go be awesome.